Okay, let's go ahead and get started. My name is David Comisford. I am the founder of EduSourced. We created the first online platform to help manage and support project-based learning and experiential learning programs in higher education. We co-founded, along with the University of Illinois' Andrew Allen, who I'll be introducing in a moment, the Engaged Learning Network. This is, right now, it's a LinkedIn group where we're able to all connect. It's for like-minded folks who are interested in kind of the nexus between industry and universities, specifically project-based learning, where students are working on team-based projects for outside companies. So we're big believers in that model of learning, and we formed the Engaged Learning Network to foster community around it. We hold a regular webinar series, and in the past we've spotlighted experiential learning programs. Today we'll be hearing a little bit from the industry perspective. I would like to introduce Andrew Allen at this point, the director of the University of Illinois Business Consulting. Andrew?
Thanks, David. As mentioned, I'm the director of Illinois Business Consulting, IBC, at the University of Illinois. IBC is the largest student-run, professionally managed university consulting organization in the country. We have about 350 students in our program and conduct 70 to 80 large-scale consulting projects each year with companies in the U.S. and around the world. We also support other experiential learning programs at the University of Illinois. And now I'll introduce our two speakers, and before doing that, I'll just mention we like to make these webinars a discussion. And so we'll be pausing throughout the webinar for Q&A. And so if you look at on your screen with the Go to Webinar window, you should see an option at the bottom half of that window for questions. So if at any point you'd like to bring up a question, please type it into that box and we'll try and address as many of them as we can during the webinar. With that, I'll introduce our two speakers. First, Dr. Jim Spohrer. He's the Director of Global University Programs at IBM. In his current role, Jim is responsible for IBM's strategic university relationships worldwide. These relationships span from recruiting to talent development to research and to a myriad of other special projects. Jim, before this role, served as the Director of Almaden Service Research and CTO of Venture Capital Relations at IBM. And prior to IBM, Jim worked at Apple Computer as a scientist and developer. Dr. Phil Gardner is the Director of the Collegiate Employment Research Institute at Michigan State University. And Dr. Gardner's major areas of research include the transition from college to work, early socialization and career progression in the workplace, workforce readiness, and other areas related to college student studies. Each year MSU does a nationally recognized college labor market study, and this is done under Phil Gardner's direction. And he served as the senior editor of the Journal of Cooperative Education and Internships. So with that, we'll pass it off to Phil and Jim.
Well, good afternoon. I'm welcoming you. This is Phil Gardner, and we're going to start, and Jim's going to open up the conversation talking about the imperative of why the world outside the university is stressed about the kind of individual that they need to be successful. He's going to lay out the context for what we're going to discuss today, and then I'm going to follow and talk about this T professional, and then get into some of the engagement on campus that needs to happen. So, Jim.
Hi, thanks very much, Phil, and David and Andrew, thanks for this great opportunity today to talk to folks about this imperative, which I think we all feel. Industry certainly feels it. I know higher education feels it, that we need to find new models for working together. And as laid out on this first slide, these new models are necessary because of the dynamics. It's a much faster paced world. To give you an example, yesterday I was at an IBM meeting with about 400 people in San Francisco, and we were talking about the next generation of cognitive systems, cloud systems, Internet of Things, big data. It's just from an industry perspective, finding the talent that is required to deal with this rapid change is one that we need to work closely with higher education to address. There's also more, complexity in terms of career pathways. Some students are graduating, and not going into the traditional large businesses. Many are doing startups, there's social enterprises, there's medium-scale businesses, there's global assignments. So there's a lot more career pathways as well these days. And I think everybody agrees that technology is moving very, very rapidly as one of the drivers. And technology is moving so fast that sometimes some of the types of career pathways that were high in demand just 10 years ago may actually, because of a technology disruption, no longer be in such high demand. So I think we all agree that there is this new imperative. And in a nutshell, if we try to explain it from an industry perspective, and I think what you have to keep in mind for industry, especially IT industries, with the IBMs and Cisco's and HP's and Google's and Apple's and you know them all real well, we're really concerned with innovation. Whether you're a large company like IBM or whether you're a new startup company, you're only going to be able to serve your customers and your other stakeholders if you can stay very, very innovative. And innovation these days isn't just technology innovation, it's also business model innovation. If you look at the Airbnbs and Ubers, which are disrupting some of the hotel chains and taxi chains, it's not just, yes, the technology enables it, but it's also business model innovation that's happening. And all of this, of course, runs into public policy and legal and regulatory issues. So very quickly you start seeing that if you're going to be at the forefront of innovation, you're going to need employees who not only understand technology trends and where technology is going, but also understand business model trends, also understand the different industry sectors and how healthcare versus retail is being affected by these new trends, and also public policy, because at the end of the day, there are a lot of regulatory issues that span, obviously global regulatory issues is one thing, but even local regulatory issues are something that has to be understood. So what we see is that there are these new complex challenges, and to solve these complex challenges and speed up the rate of discovery and the rate of innovation, not surprisingly, people from different disciplines must communicate with each other more and more efficiently and pool their expertise efficiently to work together. Now, as David and Andrew said at the very beginning, and when they were talking about the EduSource platform, the best way to really learn these skills is to work on multidisciplinary team projects with industry. That is a very, very good way to learn these complex communication skills, to get that experience and to adapt rapidly. However, many of the top universities, student classes, and except for the capstone project maybe at the very end of their undergraduate experience, they don't really get that much opportunity to work with industry on real world problems. Now that's changing, and we're part of that change, and I'm sure many of you who are dialed in are part of that change, and we'd like to hear from you later in the talk. But if we can go to the next slide, I'm going to turn it back over to Phil to talk about something that we think is an important mindset shift that we're going to all need to go through.
So as we get into the kind of people that Jim referred to we need to work, one thing we need to make is a kind of a mind shift from away from this, we're focused so much on a skill gap that says the current graduates don't have these skills, and we want you to think about something new in the way we're creating and asking for a new professional. It doesn't happen very often. In fact, the last time was in the 1950s that we asked for the academia asked for a completely different person. And the reason I want to encourage people to start talking that way is when I go around and people ask how to solve the problems with this interface, they look as a gap as a way, well, maybe if we're just missing one or two things, give me a silver bullet, and if we can just fix it or add this one skill in, it'll be solved. It's not that simple, because it's more complex than just skills and competencies. It involves attitudes, behaviors, and values, and they're intertwined and intermixed. The other thing that we were going to talk about at several points today is that in the development of the people we're talking about, it's a developmental process that is initiated even before they come to colleges and universities, but during colleges and universities. But it is a long-term endeavor to develop Ts. So we just don't have these fully developed Ts and pass them off, or these new professionals and pass them off. So we're dealing with lag effects, things that take several years after somebody graduates from college before they're able actually to leverage some of these competencies that they may be developing. Okay, so we're looking at a new employee, and to give you some more background than we're going to be able to give you, I suggest, and Jim will talk about this later, I encourage you to go to the TSummit.org website, which is collected a lot of information about Ts. It also promotes our annual TSummit in March for more information, and Jim's going to talk about this a little later. Now, there are literally hundreds of studies currently going on about skills and competencies, and I'm not going to cover all of them. You may have been well aware. If you're not, I'll be glad to, off this webcast, share those with you. I do want to share with you, it's become jokingly known as my potato study with Boise State, mainly to make a point about this idea and the mind shift. Most of our studies working with employers on what they need and the kind of skill companies are based on surveys and Likert scales, and they tend to present some problems. To avoid those problems, we tried some new methods in Boise State, and what happened was the impetus was to try to find the silver bullet, but what we really found were that skill sets, these skills we talk about needing, they don't come as single items. They come bundled together, integrated across experiences, and they are not all driven by the curriculum or as the curriculum is currently presented. And so what we found at Boise were these two predominant bundles and a number of other skills that laid in waiting until these bundles took hold, and then they are drawn upon. And so some of the things you may be really interested on are on these lists. They're not out of the picture. They just need this development of these integrated bundle of skills. And this point I want to make is if you look at the skills that are in bold, we can attribute those to the development of the mastery of the academic major. But the other ones can come from any kind of interaction. It can co-curricular experiences that link classroom outside. It can come from a totally co-curricular experience that that's involved in community engagement that may not be directly related to academic learning at all. So it takes all of these experiences together to build these bundles and platforms, which will be the integral part of this new professional we're going to call the T. And so this is someone that is adaptable and is innovative and can take advantages in new niches as they open up in systems, and we'll explain this in a minute, and be innovative and creative. And this is why everything's moving so fast, and there's just an imperative that we have this new professional. So I'm going to draw out this new professional, what it looks like fully developed, and then we'll talk about it. So the first part is a part that says we have to have depth. This is not moving away from a major. We have to have depth, and it comes in two ways. It comes in the form of mastery of the discipline. That just doesn't mean knowledge, the content, some fundamental understanding of the content. It means what drives the academic major that a young person has chosen. It's the analytical thinking, how you go about solving problems. It's the way you communicate. It's a deep mastery of how the basic principles are related to other principles to drive something, whatever that discipline is about. Paralleling that is the desire to have individuals deep in a system. Now, there's many ways to describe a system, and I like Jim's way. He says we'll take all of them, but in this, IBM, and we're using IBM's approach to the system, and Michigan State has adopted and modified this to parallel its main imperatives that we're driving at. But IBM has these groups of systems. They're systems of flow that deal with, and let me back up, these systems are ones that you and I are influenced by every single day of our lives. So these are not ambiguous systems kind of things that we may think on a theoretical level, but these are just true applications. So there's systems of flow, which are transportation, supply chain, water, food, energy, and the cloud. And then there's systems that involve human interactions, from education to health, banking, and retail, building, construction. And then there's systems of governing with different responsibilities at all three levels. And what we want here is a young person or any professional to be engaged in understanding how a total system works. Because if you come in and you try to solve a problem at one point in the system and you don't understand the rest of the system, likely you might solve it at that point, but the problem may just migrate to somewhere else. And that's why you need different disciplines working with each other in a system, because they see the different movements in the system, and instead of just moving a problem to somewhere else, you truly break that problem and open the system up to innovation and you solve the problem. So this is really important, to begin to take a mindset with young people in particular, to have a systems approach to what they're doing. Now, I also have the me, and I'm going to punt on the me, other than I'm going to say that in the T, the me, or how do I know myself as an individual, is really, really important. Okay, you have to know yourself, you have to know what your values are, you have to have a sense of your own career advancement, because you're going to now deal in worlds without a lot of defined boundaries. And that's what a T does, they cross boundaries, and this is what we're going to get to on the top part of the T. Now, the me has been critical for us, and we're forming it as the foundation of undergraduate education. This would take me way too long today, so I'm going to punt on that. Those that want to hear more about it, I'll be glad to, on the side, do that. Now, the most important part is the stretching of the depth outward, and being able to move it outward through, one, being able to communicate with other disciplines, being able to understand them, because you're going to work together in a system. And eventually, as you mature, you'll begin to look at how systems overlap and begin to find places where there's niches where they're both overlapping, and where a lot of growth can take and economic enterprise can take place. Now, overriding all of this are the boundary-spanning competencies that allow you now to spread wider and stretch. And these are things that we talk about all the time: teamwork, advanced communication, perspective, project management. Critical thinking takes place here more than actually in the major, and global understanding, cultural awareness. There's a whole bunches of groups of skills and companies that come together to allow us to cross functional areas, organizational boundaries, state boundaries, cultural boundaries, and things like that. So that's what a full-grown T is. But we're really dealing with little T's, little tiny T's. They come into the university, and the best way I can use this is, my dad was a peach farmer, and we used to put the new peaches and graft them in the hot houses, and they start very, very tiny. And by the time they were old enough to move out, they were about equal to coming into college, and they come in formed and somewhat secure in their growth. And it's our job in the college to grow these peach trees. But peach trees, it take 4 or 5 years to begin producing, and so it's just about the time that they leave that they begin to have any semblance of fruit. But it's usually the most rapid growth occurs between the 4th, 5th, and the 8th and 9th year, believe it or not. And these trees, this is what we're doing. So we're passing off, and this didn't come out quite clear when they blew it up, but this is one of my dad's last peach trees before he passed away, and it's a beautiful image of a tea, and it's fully loaded with fruit, and that's what we want, but it takes a while to develop it. So when I, on the academic side, preparing students, the image in the background here is a full-grown tea, but what you get is a number of little teas. They in all shapes and sizes, all capable of doing different kind of things, and some aren't stretched out too much on the top and have more eye. Some are stretched out more on the top than have eye, so the depth. So we have to work with them, and we pass them off. That's why what we're going to do here the rest of the day is talk about this pipeline and how to develop it. But at this point, Jim's going to talk just a little bit about the TSummit and why it's important, and we're going to take some questions up to this point. Because I went through that really fast.
Yeah, you did a great job, Phil, and I just want to take a minute before we jump into questions to talk a little bit about the upcoming TSummit 2016. But before I talk about that, I'll put in one more plug for this analogy with the trees. I grew up on an apple farm in Maine, so I think that's one of the reasons Phil and I get along so well, is we know there's no quick fix silver bullets to this. As you watch the growth of any type of system, certainly students, it's what you can put in place that gets repeated many, many times through several years that's going to form the type of little T's becoming big T's, becoming really lifelong learning T's. And so we really want to emphasize that there is no quick fix silver bullet in all of this, but you have to have many, many, many opportunities to work together in teams on many, many different types of projects across systems and across disciplines, and that takes time. There's no quick fix. Anyway, if you're interested in really engaging with Phil and I more on this topic, we really do invite you to the TSummit 2016, which is in Washington, D.C. next March 21st and 22nd. Don't know if there'll be cherry blossoms then, but I think if you look it up on the web, it's going to be pretty good. But please do submit a proposal. Again, we know a lot of you on this call today are here not because you're finding out from scratch, but because you're actively engaged in this area of creating more project-based curriculum, co-curricular activities crossing industry and academics for students. So we really want to hear from you. There is a proposal deadline of October 30th, so there's only a couple weeks left, but you just need a paragraph or so, get it in before the deadline, submit it, go out to that URL, and there's an email address. I think it's tsummit@isaac.org, and we'd love to hear from you. And actually now we'd love to hear your questions and comments.
So Andrew, if you have questions you can guide us to for a few minutes before we move on.
Yeah, we'll spend about 9 or 10 minutes here on questions, so everyone on the call, if you have some questions, feel free to submit them through the box. I've got a few here that we can get started with. This is a two-part question and directed to either Jim or Phil, and I'll ask both parts and then you can take it from there. So back to the potato study and the skills and bundles that you talked about, Phil. Let's say a university offers many of these types of experiences or experiences, opportunities that would give students these experiences. Does a university need to organize these into some kind of cohesive roadmap rather than just throw them all up on the wall and let students pick and choose? So that's part one. And then part two is, do any specific programs come to mind that you think are great examples of providing opportunities and directing students so they can become these T-shaped candidates that you're talking about?
Well, I can answer the first one. I'll let me think about the second one. Okay, so you're right. What happens is all these activities are out there, and students come to the university, and it's like one huge, gigantic buffet, and they jump in anywhere, and there's no rhyme or reason. But my concern is not so much that they get a roadmap of which ones to do first and when to do them. That we do a lot of that. My concern is as they engage in whatever they're engaging in school, that's what we want them to be engaged in, whether it's community engagement or not. there's no integration going on across experiences. These skills and competencies and behaviors and attitudes that we're talking about just aren't created out of one experience. They're multiple, and we have to link them together. We have to be able to have discussions from every year, every couple times a year about what's going on, what did you learn from that, how did that develop you, what kind of skills, so they can see themselves building these things. If they wait to the senior year, it's too late to put it all back together. And so what I see missing is not a roadmap to what they should be engaged in. I think there's too many roadmaps and they just use it as a checklist. It's how do we help them integrate these experiences to pull out their story, to show how they're developing these skills and competencies. Does anybody do a good program? I think there are programs emerging. I certainly don't know the total landscape. Jim will certainly see this different. It may see different perspective than I do. I mean, we're trying hard. We started here at Michigan State by just simply trying to unpack study abroad experiences and try to repack them in so students can have conversation with employers that spread to other kind of activities, and we're starting to link them together. There are other programs. I think there's some folks from BYU on today in humanities. Their Humanities Plus program is one that begins to do this. But I'm sure that there's others that can talk here even on the webinar that say, hey, we're doing something that's like this. I don't certainly know all. I just know there's a lot of experimentation going on right now.
Yeah, I'll pick it up, and I think the good news is that I'm seeing, IBM works with about 5,000 universities worldwide, institutions of higher education, and all the trends I see are very, very positive. Many universities are setting up design centers or innovation centers on their campus that are really focused on bringing together multidisciplinary teams and industry to work on problems. Now that's concentrated in one place at the university, and just as an exemplar, one of the oldest ones is the D School at Stanford. So if you haven't visited the D School at Stanford and you're wondering about an exemplar program, I really encourage you to go there. Every time I walk in that building, even if it's not scheduled, I'm usually grabbed by Larry Leifer or some of the faculty there, and they say, oh, we've got some student teams presenting, come give some feedback. So it's a very dynamic environment. You see industry people in there all the time. You see multidisciplinary students teams. I was very encouraged the last time I was there. Somebody whispered in my ear, we're thinking of making this a mandatory requirement for every incoming Stanford undergraduate. So I think there are some exemplars out there. I think Purdue Polytech is also doing a good job on integrating the notion of industry badges. A lot of industry organizations, of course, are concerned with lifelong learning and how does the T-shaped professional continue to develop even after the first, 4 or 5 years of undergraduate. And so Purdue Polytech, I think, has got some great ideas. I really don't want to single just Stanford and Purdue out, because literally I'm seeing hundreds of wonderful experiments happening, and I'm talking to a lot of universities who are, starting their design centers or innovation centers. Now, once they have the design and innovation center, though, then the challenge becomes, how do you get this integrated into all courses? And I know that may seem impossible, like Shakespeare. How am I going to integrate a team-based industry perspective into my Shakespeare and humanity courses? Believe me, there are people out there figuring that out. Come to the TSummit in March 21st, 22nd in Washington, D.C., and you'll hear a little bit about that.
Sure, excellent answers, and thank you for providing those, Jim and Phil, in your experience. We've got another question here. Given the fact that this is a priority nationally, are you aware of any funding streams at the national or federal level or national philanthropic level to implement the variety of programs that we're talking about?
Yes. Now, unfortunately, they take on a disciplinary flavor, and they're not as big as I would like to see. But if you go out to the National Science Foundation website and look for the program called RED, R-E-D, Revolutionizing Engineering Departments, they explicitly talk about T-shapes and the importance of being T-shaped engineers. If you look at Harvard Business Review, if you're in the business school, they have Morton Hansen, I guess he's at Berkeley these days, has a piece on the T-shaped manager. If you, again, I'm doing this plug for the TSummit, but if you go out to the TSummit website, there's a lot of different resources you'll see. There's even whole countries like Singapore has a program to make all of their hires into the government in Singapore T-shaped, and they talk about, you know, T-shaped project managers in the Singapore government. So I would say we're still at the early stages of the broad acceptance of this concept of T-shapes, but you see it in many, many places. A lot of CEOs talk about it. The CEO of IDEO, for example, talks about T-shapes. Many, many places. Go out to the TSummit website and you'll find other resources, both national, international, and state level initiatives around T-shapes. Just beginning, most of them.
Thank you. We've got time for one more question, and you both touched on this in a way, but maybe this is a slightly different angle. Can you speak to cross-degree initiatives such as, you know, engineering, combining engineering and business that are addressing the top level of the T?
Yeah. I was just at Berkeley for a visit. By the way, I'm based out here at the IBM Almaden Research Center in Silicon Valley, so when I mention universities out here, it's because I visit them so frequently. But Professor Solomon Darwin at Berkeley brought together 25 of his business students and 25 students from engineering, paired them up so they sat side by side, an engineering student and a business student. Industry was there teaching about how to do data science with the data science tools. Obviously, the engineers were there for the tools, but the business people were there to understand the application areas. So yeah, I'm seeing lots of things, both from the grassroots level inside of individual courses, as well as more, you know, systematic efforts that do span these discipline boundaries. And if I had to say what is bringing them together, it's data. I mean, I'm even seeing it in the arts and humanities where, you know, we live now in a data abundant world. There are websites where you can go find every novel that's ever been written. That's data for arts and humanities. That's data for Shakespeare, you know, scholars. So I do think that you can get the disciplines together productively when they have the right data sets, and we're entering this data abundant big data era. So I think that's partly why this bringing these things together now makes more sense maybe than it did 20 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I can give some other examples. I mean, Bradley down in Peoria brought their engineering, business, and entrepreneurial programs together, so they're doing a lot of T-shaped projects. If you look at the Sloan Industrial Masters programs in the sciences, they early on bridged with science and business, and so we're seeing a lot of that. I think I'm gonna save my talk about this till later because it's going to come up in a point that I'm going to make in just a minute when we get into the talent pipeline.
Yeah, I'll just add one more thing. I don't think it's just business and engineering. I'm seeing a lot with public policy because the regulatory stuff is so important these days, and of course, you know, arts and humanities because communicating it and production of the videos, the websites, and the social media stuff that go along with these collaborative projects. So I think it's broader than just business and engineering connecting. It's public policy and arts and humanities and truly, you know, multidisciplinary project teams.
Thank you, Phil and Jim. I'll just add one more to that list. University of Illinois has a program called the Technology and Management Program. It's the HOEFT, H-O-E-F-T, Technology and Management Program, where it's actually a minor. Students have to apply, and it's the combination of engineering and business students, and the curriculum is all designed around current needs in the marketplace. There's a capstone project, and there's a list of corporate partners that participate in the design of the curriculum, as well as the project experiences, and then on into the hiring. If any other questions come up, please type them in the box on your right. Now we'll move into the second section and pass it back to you, Phil and Jim.
Yeah, what I'm going to talk about now is the talent pipeline, and it's really important. A lot of the focus and effort as the examples have given, is what happens on the left-hand side of this pipeline, and I know that there's a lot going on the right-hand side of the pipeline. In my mind, this image would be the world of the corporations and the organizations and nonprofits that are going on out there and developing Ts. It's not quite, we don't have a lot of information on that. But also it's how we connect the two pipelines. If we're going to build Ts, is that connector pipeline where they connect, really facilitating Ts. So I'm going to go through this collaboration. If we're going to really focus on this new professional, it has to be a collaborative effort, because it can't be done just by one side or the other. So I'm going to break this into periods, because T development, as you saw in my analogy of the peach tree, starts very early. And so talent development and around the T starts from day one. That actually it starts in high school and earlier. College, universities, at least I'm going to frame it from there, starts on day one. And one of the reasons is that the dating is starting earlier. This is kind of a tongue-in-cheek way of saying that employers are much more interested in young talent and identifying young talent from across different disciplines, even if they're traditionally an engineering firm or a business firm. They're looking for a talent pool that they can develop and gain awareness with and share with, and begin to move them into activities that will help develop this profile that they need. It just can't be done by waiting to the end of the junior year and getting an internship and hope you get a job. So there's a lot of early things going on, and a lot of it's around group activities. Younger students and freshmen and early sophomore year like to go in groups. They don't like to go alone. So we at Michigan State, for example, have set up our career exposure programs with companies to bring students that are interested in companies together, either taking them to on-site visits or bringing a number of primarily probably alumni back to work with them, but starting even with just group dating and ways that younger college students become familiar with, comfortable with, begin to understand the language of what it's going to be like to deal with these professionals. And we're looking for a lot of different kinds of ways to engage, and we've talked about the competitions, we've talked about the team projects. They set the stage, and they have to come from an early level. They can't be wait until that capstone course. We need to get them involved. And the way that the employers get involved really sets the stage. Now, I will be critical here, because most of its activity I see is between the business and the engineering school. And yet there are stuff going on around these things that involve the creative and the technical side. But where I don't see happening is projects being in competitions designed around having all those disciplines at the table at the same time, and making sure that there's, it's not just about business, but they dominate, but it's constant to get these to push. And every once in a while we'll get a break and we'll have a business line up with one, but it's really hard. It's been difficult because of silos to get everybody to work. The other thing that I want to point out to people, because when we talk extensively about developing Ts, and I've done a number of focus groups with employers now, and they'll say, oh, what you're talking about is leadership. In our organization, that's what we want for leadership. And so they'll talk about depth and breadth. They may not talk about T's. But what they'll say to us is you need to develop that early, because the message is everybody leads, every seat leads. So we're working on engaged leadership that's not just the typical leadership that we have in campus. That's fine. But for every student to begin to build these what they do around a leadership model for T, because that's what we've really gotten down to. If you look at a T leader, everything we've talked about is there. So we're really talking about leadership from every sector. And so we're engaging leadership activities that are T focused. And then that gets us to the heart and soul of what the T developments come from. It's going to be internships and experiential engagements in a partnership. These now we're seriously looking at, are they the student outcomes that we want from these align with the T? And at Michigan State, for example, we've kind of aligned all our learning outcomes around T-related factors based on our key core skill sets. Is the assignment going to be in a T culture? Are we developing T's and then we get them in an internship and it goes right back to an I culture and they're just assigned a task and that's all they do? To have an effective T, you need constant feedback and evaluation. Evaluation and assessing and seeing where the growth and development's going. And it has to be intentional. It has to be very, very intentional that this is what we're doing, and realizing that sometimes not every engagement produces a T, but it lays a piece of the Lego set that I'm going to talk about at the end, and allows us to integrate. So if we're more intentional about it, we can make sure that even if it's not a T engagement per se, we can then use that. Now here's the thing that has to happen on the university side, and I do talk about this a lot. We have to introduce the climate of the workplace into what we ask students to do, both in academics and these projects. We have to introduce ambiguity, that we don't plan out in my 30-page syllabus now everything we're going to do every day, and where I'm going to lead them from A to B to C to D all the way to Z. I've got to let students figure out how to get them to B, and I say, I'm going to meet you at G, point G, and you've got to figure out how to get there. And I'm not going to let them fall off the cliff or anything. We have to have them face ambiguity. We have to let them experiment and set up these competitions and projects so there's not a solution every time, that they may fail, so we can talk about how to move past that and what do we learn from that. Third thing is we got to build networks. Students don't realize from the day they walk in campus they're building a professional network, and they don't see that. The role of social capital is often lost to them until late. We've got to leverage those systems that are in place that are more, and those are particularly professional associations, and there's a lot of student professional associations that can link with the people that have graduated. We got to be cognizant of team dynamics more. Teams aren't set up very effectively on college campuses for the most part. They're getting a lot better, but it's all about collaboration and how different people think in collaborative ways. So we have to be much more intentional about that, and we have to reintroduce mentors. I know that's an awful thing to say at a school with over 40,000 undergraduates. How many mentors do we need? But the mentor process, as we're going to see a little bit later, is critical. And all of these things go together as Legos, and we've got to help the students how to give them the courage to put these blocks together to see how they go together. In fact, we need to understand these blocks so we can teach the faculty how to put them together. I get this asked all the time by faculty is, I know about one of these approaches to help students, but I don't know how to lead them to the next one or how that connects to the next one. So a lot of the educational programs we're starting to put in place is not, faculty can't do it all, but they can, and they don't have to do it all, and they shouldn't do it all. They don't have time to do it all. But if they have an idea how different blocks fit together, they can then suggest to their students, now you've done this, I encourage you to go out here and do this. Okay, now we get to the connector stage, and this is the more in-your-face one, because this is the recruiting space. This is a transition space, and it has now become a high-stake event because now we're talking about jobs. So we have to have a high-stakes T-related experience, that last internship, that last project that takes place across multiple, it's a team project across multiple disciplines in that last of the junior year, beginning of the senior year, that's high stakes, that's outcome defined, that really sets the stage that I'm going to come and I've got the initial framework of a T. And then on the other side, employers have to come and say, I'm going to recruit Ts, and they have to consistently recruit Ts. And how does that fit in with my organizational fit models that will make sure we get the right person that's going to thrive in our fit environment, which means that we're just not passing people off anymore from the university to the employer. We got to stay connected. We've got to find ways to nurture young people into their early career stages, because that's where this growth of T comes, and is to both the higher ed and employer side imperative that we connect stronger here, so we have the resources that these people can grow on. Now I'm going to turn this over to Jim in a minute, but let me lay the stage. I know some of these are things that are his, but again, I'm going to let him talk about mentors, because in the first 5 to 8 years in the organization, mentors is important. But I also want to lay out some of the things that are important to we call them millennials, but any young professional, and it's the people they work with over the organization. They will leave if they don't form a tribe, and this is why Ts are so good. They'll form these tribes, okay? And then I let Jim talk about commitment to training and development and how we establish links back at this stage back into higher ed. So Jim, why don't you take a few minutes here?
Okay, thanks, Bill. So yeah, this is really an active area, this getting mentors for everyone, and I'm just, there's so much here, just like Phil said, he's going to pun a little bit on the me. I'm going to address this a little bit, but I just want you to know this is a huge area, and so come to the TSummit so we can have a more in-depth discussion on this. I'll also say that Scott McKinley at Cisco has got some really innovative ideas around mentoring and platforms for mentoring, and I know both David and Andrew as well have a lot of thoughts on this, and I have a blog post, I think, with about 25 different companies, startups in this area, really trying to figure out how to crack the nut in terms of platforms for industry academic mentoring. And also think about LinkedIn. I mean, think about faculty who are helping their students develop their LinkedIn profiles and network connections, because a lot of what you do as a mentor is you make sure the person that you're helping has a broad network into different organizations, different geographies. So LinkedIn can be a very, very powerful tool. And also when you're mentoring, you want to make sure that your students that you're mentoring are part of a professional association. Now, that could be, if they're engineers, maybe it's IEEE, but ISSIP, ISSIP.org is a nonprofit that IBM and Cisco and HP, a number of other companies and universities set up to help students find mentors. There's no membership fee for that, by the way. So yeah, there's a lot to say here, and we've got a huge amount of learning. Juan Caraballo on my team has looked at this, and Dale Davis and others at IBM that I work with closely. And this is really, really where we have to have a culture change inside of industry, especially, I think. There has to be a notion of everybody in industry is mentoring this next generation, and that's not the case today. How do we get that? How do we get that change to happen? And especially when industry people, obviously are very, very busy. Their managers may obviously care more about the important deadline that's coming up this week, and so a lot of people in industry are reluctant to mentor because of the time commitment, because they really don't own their calendar. The customer does, or their management does. And so we've really been thinking a lot about this space, and one of the things we're coming to is more like a team mentoring, less the I-shaped individual to individual mentoring, and more like a team of students and a team of people from industry or across different sectors. And that team to team also creates peer mentor possibilities. and other things. So this is a very, very rich area, lots of startups, lots of platforms, lots of thinking, and it's still unsolved though, I would say. And it's going to require big industry change in culture in order to really make this successful. I'll stop there and we can open it up for questions hopefully in a bit. So back to you, Phil.
To leave this, you know, there has to be a commitment to training and development teams, and more important, as we get into big data, despite the data, we need to build a better communication back from how our Ts are doing in early career and how we can help on the university side continue their development. It's not just, we're not passing off a problem or back a problem. It's not a problem. This is talent. These kids, young people are really, really good, and they've got a lot to bring to the table. They just don't know it, or they haven't been asked to show it yet. So how do we help each other in this critical years, first years on the job assignment? So why is a T important? This will end our talk here, and Jim certainly can speak to cognitive technologies and AI, because it's transforming every company I know, including and IBM's taking a lead in. And we started the kind of discussion talking about this. This is going to be constant disruptions young people are going to face. And I'm not talking about business cycles here. We'll go through business cycles, and we'll just have to deal with that. But these cognitive technologies will disrupt how jobs are performed, what jobs are available, what they'll look like, and a young person or any of us can be in a job now, and it can change it really, really quickly. And ask law profession what happened when they brought in some very advanced software that when it dropped, the price dropped and everybody could adopt it, changed things very, very quickly, and it's been very traumatic to refigure out how we retrain lawyers and don't lose their assets they bring. The system niches become really critical, because that's where all the innovation is going to blow out new ways to do things. There's going to be that's where growth of companies, new ideas, and we have to have students that are not afraid to enter those niches and take the risk to do that. And the bottom line is, we really have to prepare adaptive innovators, not just, interestingly enough, for the workplace and their career, but every facet of their life is changing and continues to change much faster than most of us want it to. And how to deal with that really requires a T kind of mentality. So we see this as more than just something to get a job, to have a career. It is a way to function in this modern world that is moving very, very fast and very, very complicated. With that, it's going to take all of us. This is my favorite quote from Dr. Seuss and the Lorax, and you know, I love all those students, and I hope that, but they can't stay. They have to go out and find their way, and I hope that they can find what they need. They don't starve to death, and I hope that's a mutual with all the employers involved, that we do this together, you know, make it a lot easier. So again, we're at the final few minutes here, and Andrew will take the questions that you have, and I want to thank everybody right now for their time and that they've been with us. And if you have any questions that don't get covered here, feel free to contact me, and I'll be glad to answer them.
Thank you so much, Jim and Phil. Before we pass off to some questions, we have had some questions come in. I'll let David make a couple announcements, and then we'll address the questions.
Hi everyone, this is David Comisford. Just real quick, in case we go over time, wanted to let everybody know this session has been recorded. It will be posted in the LinkedIn group for the Engage Learning Network. All of you tomorrow will get an email with a link to that. So many of you are already a member. If you're not, you're welcome to join. So you'll be able to do that if you like. And that's where the video will be posted. It'll also be up on edusource.com under resources. That's where we post our webinars. The other thing is, I noticed GoToWebinar in the past few days has sent out an enormous sum of email notifications that came from me. So if it looks like I bombarded your inbox, I do apologize. GoToWebinar got a little ahead of us. And I just want to say thank you to Dr. Jim Spohrer and Dr. Phil Gardner for the presentation. I think this was great in furthering the conversations, a lot of novel concepts here. So thank you both so much. The next step is we'll take a few of your questions before we run out of time, and then it sounds like we'll be able to continue the conversation afterwards. So if you have further questions, feel free to reach out to Phil or Jim or follow up about the T-shaped summit.
And to follow up on that, we will post some of these questions if we don't get to them on our LinkedIn group, and so we can address some of the questions to keep the conversation going there as well. So Jim and Phil, here's a question. How do you measure if you are T-shaped? How do we certify that graduates are T-shaped, as you were describing earlier?
Okay. Well, Jim will certainly have, I'll let him explain, a professional that's been out with experience because he and his colleague, a close colleague, have worked on that. At my end, it's a little more problematic yet. We really aren't sure on all the assessment or the measurement of T yet. We're working on that, with colleagues everywhere, we're trying to get a sense of that. I mean, we can work pieces of it, but I have a colleague here at Michigan State that's heavily invested in trying to find T-shape measurement. It's a lot of non-cognitives here, and it makes it problematic. And while we can get individual pieces, when we overlay them to get a bigger piece, they don't all mesh well together. So I'm not punting on this, but this is a challenge, and this is something we have to do. And most little baby T's don't have the track record yet that you can look back and reflect back and look at your T-ness that Jim's going to talk about. There's potential to do that, but we're still very much in fundamental developmental mode here on this question, and it's probably the most important question that I have to look at right now because, well, it's the second most. How we're going to integrate it in undergraduate education is one, but then linked to that, if you're going to integrate it, then you better have some outcomes you want, and you better have some ways that you can assess development and you can evaluate the program, which are two different things around the T. And yeah, I'm sorry, I'm personally just wading in and getting eaten by alligators here.
So as part of the ISIP network, the International Society of Service Innovation Professionals that promotes T-shapes, and Professor Lou Froing at San Jose State University has been developing a way to code your resume. So each line of your resume gets coded into a T measurement tool, and each of the T-summits we've had a code your resume to determine how T-shaped you are. But I would just echo what Phil said. It's still early days, and we're evolving these measurement tools. Good question, though. Next question.
Here we are. So another question is kind of a two-part question. Question is, how do we start or expand the national debate around this, and does it have to be around T-shaped, or is it around the T-Summit, or are there other avenues or channels? And then the second part of that is, Phil, you described a process where companies are requesting T-shaped candidates and universities are producing T-shaped candidates. That requires that everyone understands what T-shaped means, and so there's an education piece there, awareness piece. If you can just talk about the national debate as well as kind of at a university to company level.
Well, I don't know if it's a debate. I would say that what we see out there is a significant increase in the the dialogue that's going on around a new kind of professional. Yes, we've embraced the metaphor of the T, but I hear it in a lot of different ways. It's about breadth and depth, and other people may be using other variations around that. I do think, though, and I don't know what, the T-Summit isn't certainly bringing all those various viewpoints together, but I think there are people like Jim and myself that are beginning to see these streams and trying to bring them together, and I will say that certain sectors are going to lead this. if I was in the Midwest, I'd say it's manufacturing, but it's not going to be straight manufacturing. It's going to be those organizations that are heavy into working on problems of complex systems. They're going to be a lot of those that are in the avant-garde of the new systems-based economy. So it is going to be the IBMs and the GEs and those kind, even though they may have a manufacturing base hidden in there. They're going to be out of hospitals. They're going to be out of, believe it or not, you'd never know it from the rhetoric about Wall Street, but it's going to come out of the banks. Just have to do it different. So I think you're going to see a lot of this come, and I don't know if we'll ever get a common platform, but my president at the university handled that question quite good, because she said, they were asked, is this a fad or is this something that's going to last? And she says, it doesn't make any difference whether you call it a tea or a pie or whatever. What we do know is to engage in the 21st century and to solve the problems, we need depth and breadth in every one of our individuals, and they need to be able to lead. And it doesn't matter if it's not just the top 25% of our students, it's every single one of them. So we have to just attend to this, and it's not going to be easy. But I think the debate's going to change into a broader discussion of how we're going to deliver the people that are going to cooperate. Now, how we're going to get these people aligned, and the education program that goes on is huge, because we don't often talk the same language. Again, we have colleagues, Jim and I have colleagues that have come up with the concept of trading zones to try to get us together. I think you're going to see movement on this rather quickly on the employer side to get to organizational fit measures now that they can use big data, and not just do robo-recruiting, but actual organizational fit kind of measures. Whether we'll get a common definition out of that, that's probably not going to happen, because every organization has a different cultural thing, and they're going to manipulate the organizational fit a bit. But you're going to start seeing just a general movement away to the emphasis on the breadth, assuming that the depth is there, and you're going to see less talk about majors in 20 years than we are today, but about the total person at the university's graduating. That's just my take on things. I won't be around in 20 years, so you can post on my gravestone whether it happened or not.
I'll just add quickly, and I know we're over time, that President Simon at Michigan State University also said it's not just about T-shaped individuals and people, but it's about T-shaped organization. And she's concerned about how does she make Michigan State University a T-shaped organization. We certainly talk about the same thing at IBM, T-shaped organizations, T-shaped countries, because the world requires some level of specialization and depth in any particular area to be competitive at any time. But if you don't have the breadth and can't rapidly adapt, you can find yourself like Detroit, who specialized in auto, and then there's a collapse of the auto, and where are you? So there is this notion that the T-shaped metaphor is broader than just for individuals. So yeah, I agree with Phil. It's going to be around a lot longer than I'll be around this debate. And you can look for like ambidextrous organizations. It goes by many different names. Gardner has, I think they call them versatilists. So there's many different names, but it all comes down to the depth and breadth, the areas of specialization as well as the areas of adaptability and breadth. So it's a general concept.
Well, Jim and Phil, thank you so much for your time today, and on behalf of everyone who attended and the Engaged Learning Network, we really appreciate your time and expertise. As David mentioned, we have our LinkedIn group called the Engaged Learning Network, and invite those of you to join who have not done so we can get you updates on our next upcoming webinars and ongoing conversations. So thank you all for joining, and with this we'll close the call.
Thank you. Bye.